pilot.
All right. Today is June 9th, 2021, and this is a meeting of the City Council, and I'm calling it to order.
Councilmember Duncan.
Here.
Councilmember Ferguson.
Here.
Councilmember Knobloch.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem James.
Here.
And Mayor Ward.
Present. Okay. Would everyone please rise, and Mayor Pro Tem James will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Certainly.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with peace and justice.
Okay. First item on the agenda is a public hearing and workshop concerning the City of San Clemente proposed budget for fiscal year 2021-22. And we do have at least one card, but I imagine more will be coming in for the public hearing.
Okay. Let's hear the public comments first, because I'd like to hear the presentation uninterrupted.
Okay.
So we'll take the public comments first.
Would you like to
officially open up the public hearing?
Yes, I'm opening the public hearing. Thank you very much.
The first speaker will be Paula Cole.
Hi guys, I'm here to talk about page 101, which is your expenses regarding the general fund. Last year, well, let me talk about the Human Affairs Committee is a recipient of a lot of grant applications, and we've been doing this for I don't know how many years, but at least 5. And there are at least 11 agencies in town that are nonprofit that serve probably 40% of the people in town, the children, the seniors, the homeless, the hungry. And the city has always been able to find a little bit of money to help these people make their way through our city. Last year, every year we've pretty much budgeted about $55,000, and we have massive meetings. We visit all the organizations. We understand what they do, and we have a big meeting involving a city council member where we look at their grant applications and we make some pretty interesting and very thought about decisions about what money they're going to get. And every year they've gotten a piece of the money that we have available. Last year, none of the money was given to them. They asked for $54,000, we approved $54,000, and they got 0. And the reason was the pandemic, which we understood last year. And we were hoping that money would come in during the year that we would get for them, but no money came in. This year, I looked at the budget, hoping that the $54,000 would be reinstated for the new grant applications this year. And the budget was again 0 for this piece. So the pandemic is over. The budget item has been removed, and I think it was overlooked. I think that there's money left in our budget to fund these organizations. And I have brought with me COA and I-5 to tell you a little bit more about the impacts of this money to their organizations. I will also say that it's impacting the Boys and Girls Club. It's impacting FAM. It's impacting Laundry Love. All they want is $2,000 to help people do their laundry that can't afford it. It's impacting children getting shoes, children getting backpacks to go to school. It's not that much money. It's $54,000. So I'm hoping that you can reinstate that money and not have to wait for the money to come in the fall, which I know that you are slating us to get money in the fall. I know that, but I'm hoping that you can find money now so that they don't have to wait another year, because these organizations are used to getting money from the city. And if they were for 1 year, I can understand, but the second year, they have to change everything. And now it's too late. So I'll let them talk. Thank you.
Next is Brenda Wells.
I'm hoping it's safe enough for me to take my mask away. You guys are far enough away, 6 foot distance. So I am here to talk about 2 interests. One is the Human Affairs Committee. I won't rehash anything that Paula said, but I will reiterate the amount of time and effort that we spend vetting these organizations, the time we take, feeling out what their needs are, hearing what they have to say, and really what the things that they do to bring to our community stronger, and the services that they really bring here. The fact that it was cut out of the budget last year was completely understandable. We had no idea where we were going with the coronavirus, and we were able to make up for that, mentally as an organization. But to hear that it was cut out again was really frustrating. Again, as a Human Affairs Committee member, we were not brought into conversation. I've kind of been frustrated with the way the city, the council members have seemed to be disengaged with the work that we do. We really like to have a stronger, more relevant purpose with this committee, and to be valued for the great intellectual capital that is in that room, led by Paula Cole. The other interest I want to talk about is as a beneficiary, potential beneficiaries in a nonprofit here in San Clemente, the I-5 Freedom Network. We were bringing, our need was to bring workshops to at-risk youth, to give them the skills that they needed to be stronger and more emotionally capable to deal with all of the things that came through this coronavirus. We've heard about over and over again, the Wellness Prevention Center, how desperate these kids have become. Anxiety, ideation has gone way up. And the role that we were bringing to them was going to help mitigate that. Almost all of the programs that are going to be covered were there to be there for the community members in these really difficult times. And to hear that these funds were going to be cut again was not just devastating to the organization, but the loss to the services that were going to be brought to the community members. So I am just asking for a plea to reconsider adding these into the budget. We were told that it was going to be funded, and to have it be unfunded without any communication was, again, frustrating. And, just as it's stated in here and in the, Kathy Ward's article in the San Clemente Times said that we emerged from the coronavirus in good fiscal shape. So let's use that for good and serve our community who needs these services now more than ever. Thank you.
Terry Steele.
Hello. And first of all, thank you for being city council members and city administrator. I just have to say that I love this community. I'm the executive director of Community Outreach Alliance, and I raised my 3 sons here. One is 22, another 24, and another 29. And I learned a lot by raising my kids. And in 2014, I helped start Community Outreach Alliance with Talega Life Church. And within a couple of years, we became our own nonprofit. So 2017, and we were able to do that because the city supported the efforts. And we're very excited about the number of kids that we have kept off of drugs and alcohol. We have now what we call the alumni program. They've gone through college, or they chose occupations, and now they're coming back and they're the leaders, working with our Thrive Alive program to help the younger kids. And yeah, last year was tough. The COA kids, they created what was called Project Pandemic Override, because I told them, this is tough times. Parks and Recreation and the city programs are not funded because they need that as well. So we're going to have to make some changes. And I'm sorry, I get nervous. I work better with kids than I do talking at a mic. But what we did is we let all of our staff go. We completely rebranded. We reached out into the community. We got in-kind donations for space use. We knew that we were all working together. And then when we heard, we weren't going to get the grant last year, that's okay, because we had been really, I believe in sustainability, and I believe in saving for that rainy day. And we did that. We rolled up our sleeves, furloughed all of our employees, applied for the grants through the county, and we were able to keep going. And then we applied for the grant that we're discussing today. And I was very surprised when I heard that it wasn't funded, because we applied for it. And, again, our budget works when the money comes in, we know we have it. And so we will be fine. We're looking at corporate sponsors, but I look at the number of kids that we're serving. We're launching Thrive Alive at Mendocino Homes tomorrow night. And out of those 15 kids that take that journey for 7 weeks, I'm guaranteeing that 8 of them won't wind up on the streets. So we're looking ahead. This is our solution to stopping some of this spiral in our community where our kids are dying. That's why I stepped up to start this. I don't get paid. I'm a volunteer. And I did this because when I was approached, there were, in 2014, we had like 16 deaths, overdose and suicide, and we had that under control. And then boom, it's on the rise again. And our kids are a mess right now after handling the pandemic. Even those kids that said, we're going to roll up our sleeves, we're working with Orange County healthcare agencies, all these agencies coming together. Please do what you can to help us keep going. Because when I apply for those grants and I can put that our city backs up, it's weighted, it's huge. And I just appreciate your time. And I came out today just because I do love this city and I want to save some kids.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Vicki Wilson.
Hi, good afternoon. As she said, I'm Vicki Wilson. I did have some slides for you guys, but I guess we can just go on without. I have some prepared comments. I'm a local business owner and treasurer for the San Clemente Downtown Business Association, and it's my pleasure to present a budgetary proposal for your consideration. We are very grateful for the past and continuing support from the council, city management, and staff. 2020 gave us all enormous challenges we could never imagine, and yet through the difficulty and uncertainty, our bonds strengthened, our connection and outreach expanded, and we worked together for the greater good of our community. Thank you, Eric Sun, Jonathan Lightfoot, city staff, and council for the incredible support, communication, and collaboration. The Cdbg is a nonprofit organization focused on the thriving downtown. Our extensive marketing, events, and outreach drive commerce and provide experiences for the benefit of all of San Clemente, which increase sales tax revenue for the city. Working independently and in collaboration with the city, the Chamber of Commerce, and other community partners, here are some of the 2020 achievements. Staying healthy means staying open, with banners, hand sanitizer stations, and coordinated signage throughout the city. The popular open air dining initiative, which was crucial in keeping restaurants open and alive. Shop San Clemente First campaign, information and education webinars, pop-up shopping opportunities and live stream village art fair demonstrations, extensive marketing and social media promotion, think tanks by business sector, the early start of the downtown holiday lights, village art fair shows as health mandates allowed, and Shop Small campaign and more. The pandemic has illustrated the importance of having an organization such as the Cdbg, dedicated to the promotion, preservation, and vibrancy of a strong downtown. Our volunteer board and paid staff constantly work on outreach, communication, visibility, collaboration, marketing, and reimagining. Many challenges still lie ahead as we prepare to present the first post-pandemic community event with our 25th anniversary car show on this September 11th. The return of Santa's Village by the Sea and putting on the Glitz in December, as well then of the return of the car show in its regular summer spot of June 2022. As the world reopens, our ability to maintain momentum is critical for the stability of the downtown for businesses, residents, and tourism. An increase of $6,000 to the Cdbg budget allotment for a total of $40,000 would allow us to continue this very high level of valuable work, bringing vibrancy, business, events, and revenue to a place we all call home. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Mayor Ward, if I could just add too, as the DBA rep, Vicki didn't mention it, but they were also the Chamber of Commerce Nonprofit of the Year, I believe, for 2020. All right. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to close the public hearing. I just want to ask a couple questions because the comment was made that we didn't provide anything for this year and we cut everything. And I believe that's not totally true because we paid it through Cdbg funds. We increased our allotment to some of our core services. So I'd like to hear about that. But the second point I want to make too is not funding it right now. There was a comment made that they'll have to wait another year. The fall is the same year. we budget from July 1st to next June 30th of 2022. So if we're looking at something in the fall, it still is in this year.
That's correct. And so I'll answer two questions. This was going to be part of the budget workshop presentation. I was going to address this issue as well.
Okay.
But since you brought it up, Mayor, I'll bring it up now. So for fiscal year 2021, we initially, our first round of grants, we produced $53,400 in grants. Those grants went to Camino Health, City of San Clemente Fund on the Run, and Family Assistance Ministry. And then we received additional Cdbg COVID dollars in this current budget year. We allocated an additional $188,538 to nonprofits. And so AgeWell received $40,000, Camino Health Center received $33,000. We funded CityNet with a portion of that, $75,000, and then Family Assistant Ministries received $40,000 as well. And then as part of this fiscal year, or I should say forthcoming fiscal year 21-22, we have in the budget additional funding via Cdbg grants for Camino Health Center for $15,000. Again, City of San Clemente Fund on the Run for $8,000, and then $15,000 for Family Assistance Ministry, and another $9,000 for Laura's House. So in this proposed budget, we have about $49,000 allocated for social services grants. Now, I did have an opportunity to talk to the chair of the Human Affairs, Paula Cole, yesterday to communicate the thought process behind this. Yes, we will be coming back to the council probably within the next couple of months as we look at the federal spending plan with our federal dollars that we'll be getting from the federal government, about $7.6 million. And there is an opportunity within those dollars to provide those nonprofits that were affected by COVID some of those dollars. So it will be staff's intent to align those grant allocations to federal dollars. The purpose of the exercise in this year's budget and last year's budget was to preserve the general fund to ensure we had adequate dollars to fund the core services of the city.
Okay. I just wanted that answered for the public because we did provide it. And, you know, we look every year at the applications that come in, and it definitely goes through our human affairs, but funding is not ever guaranteed for each nonprofit every single year. You know, I know we go through that every year. So when we do that and we do that mid-year, are we going to ask everyone to apply again?
That will be something that we'll talk to staff about to see if we want to reopen up the option, if there were any individuals who didn't participate in the first round of applications and so forth. And so we'll work with staff on that.
Okay.
I have questions, but should I wait until we get into the presentation?
Well, the thing about the presentation is I was really hoping to get like a full picture and not ask questions till the end. So would it be better for him to ask a question now or wait until after the presentation?
If it's about this social services, I think we're on that subject matter. I'll entertain that question.
Yeah, just I'm wondering, City Manager Sund, about the issue of a delay in receiving money. So when would they normally receive money if it was budgeted versus when might they receive money if it came out of the ARP funds?
I'm gonna lean on Cecilia a little bit. I know she's on this. And so after July 1st, obviously, once we have the new budget year and for lack of a better description, our checkbooks are reloaded with dollars, the grant application process would then complete itself with reimbursement. And Cecilia, what would you guess the estimate to be?
Thanks, Eric. Cecilia Gallardo Daly, Community Development Director. With the social service grant funds, those grant funds are not available to the organizations at the onset of the fiscal year. They actually have to submit paperwork to us to show or to demonstrate that they are utilizing the funds for the purposes that they've identified in their applications. So they send us the information and then we provide them with the funds. That's at least how we operate the social service grants for Cdbg. And my understanding is that's how we do it for the general fund social service grants as well.
And so thank you, Cecilia. So to your question, Councilmember Kim, The federal monies are in the process of being distributed to us. They're in the pipeline, and we've already accepted the funds electronically. The same process would play out the federal dollars in terms of the same grant administrative process of the individual submitting for their reimbursements, similar to the grant process. So the timing would be pretty similar, other than maybe a 1 month lag because of the start of when we have the federal dollars.
And is there any way to load the application process? You know what I mean? So that the applications could come in before we actually receive the federal dollars, just to streamline.
If the council wanted to provide direction that, you know what, you'd like to see me reopen up the application process now and redo that process with those applications and kind of get a head start as we're working on the federal dollars, I have no problem with that.
We're talking about an application for the federal dollars, not.
And I'm just, yes, application for grant monies via the federal,
right, which is a little different because the criteria will be a little different. They have
a
to tie
little bit, but we already have the guidelines, and the biggest thing will be to show the nexus of what was affected from COVID by these nonprofits, which the speakers already elegantly spoke to that.
Yeah, I think they will be able to do that. I would like to see that happen. I think it might alleviate some of the concerns with the uncertainty about whether, you know, whether they're actually going to get money. If they're actually part of a process, they feel like they can get their paperwork in, put their best foot forward about why each and every one of them feels they deserve the money. I think that might be helpful and streamline the process down.
Wouldn't be difficult for staff to take on if the council was to give me that.
Okay, whoever is not here, can you put it on mute, except for Councilmember Ferguson? She'd like to talk right now.
Thank you. Eric, for years, as far as long back as I can remember, that we've used general fund money to contribute to the social service budget, in addition to CDBG grant funds. And both last year, well, since I've been on council, last year in the spring, and then this year, I sat down, I've been the designated person on council, and we sat down with the Human Services, Social Services group, and we've allocated these funds. But why is it that we're not using general funds? We've allocated this funding set aside all these years, but now we're looking to use the ARP money. Why not this year? Why not the general fund money? We have money. I know the property taxes came in excess over $1 million more than we had budgeted. So we do have money, and we just need to prioritize it, because boy, they do an amazing job and improve the quality of life for everyone of all ages. And we spent a lot of time on this last year and again this year, and it just seems really such a shame that it's not there.
Good question, Councilmember Ferguson. Number one priority for the city as we went into this budget process was to preserve general fund dollars. And I think it's important to note, council's already aware of this, in previous LTFPs, which obviously didn't forecast the pandemic, we knew we were going to start hitting an operating deficit with last fiscal year, or this current fiscal year. And that operating deficit was even more magnified in this proposed fiscal year. And so it's important, and again, I don't want to jump ahead of our presentation because a lot of these will be addressed in our presentation, but we, the city, are going to maintain 7 vacant positions citywide to capture about $1 million of cost savings. And we're doing that to ensure that we can A, deliver a balanced budget, and B, to be able to maintain our critical core services to the city. And so while everyone doesn't disagree of the value that these nonprofits have, we do have to put a priority into how we budget things. And so if I can preserve general fund dollars and I can use other funds to provide that same economic relief, I'm going to always go towards the other funding options so we can preserve general fund dollars, not only for one times such as CIPs, which, as we'll go through this budget, we're not going to be able to do all of the CIPs that we wanted to do. And so, or we anticipated to do as our 6-year CIP schedule. So it's really about preserving the dollars to ensure we have a balanced budget and a strong fiscal foundation.
Okay, well, fair enough. We'll get to all those in the presentation, especially your department, the city manager's department, which has an increase of 73%. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that one. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for the, we'll get into it once we do that.
Should I wait for my motion until then?
Wait till the end.
Okay.
Because, you know, I might want to add some things to that, but we should talk about it at one time. Go ahead.
as long as we're talking about this issue, a couple things I want to, I think we should understand that very well the pandemic, we're getting ready to pivot out of the health crisis of the pandemic. However, the economic impact of that health crisis remains and will remain for quite some time. And I think we do have to be very cautious on how we spend these monies going into social services. And the other thing I would ask for, Mr. City Manager, is as we look at these dollars that we're giving to these organizations, how good of a job are we doing going back and doing an evaluation of the return on investment on those taxpayer dollars that we're giving to these organizations?
So, the grant application process is kind of a real-time process. And so again, going back to what the Community Development Director, Cecilia Gardo Daly, stated, is they have to submit, basically, for lack of a better word, progress reports in order to get their allocations reimbursed. We just deal with kind of looking at the now with it relates to that. If that was something that council wanted to add further direction for staff to take into consideration, to kind of look back beyond the current year, but past years, to see what benefit the community is gaining by this, we could definitely have staff do that.
It's not like we have a reduction in vagrants on our streets. It's not, and I think we really have to look at the homeless programming that we have. What impact is that having for the citizens and taxpayers of this city?
Understood.
I take your point, Mayor Pro Tem James, but I tend to side with Councilmember Ferguson on this. I think these are great organizations that have had a track record of success by and large, and I would like to see us get their grant funding back into the general fund. But I do understand the constraints of this current year, so I'm going to be looking for the money to come out of the ARP for this year. And I take your point, City Manager Sun, but I think we've got these great organizations. I think they've documented their success, and it's just a matter of making sure that we allocate at least the opportunity to get the grant money in the most efficient way. And I know that's why you've structured it this way, and I'm sure we'll get into that in the presentation.
Understood.
The only thing I would add is I think in the past we looked at organizations and gave funding to maybe help them get going. And that certainly was the case with the Wellness and Prevention Center. It wasn't to be forever. It was to get them going and become a nonprofit and all of that. We need to look at that and look at all of them and make sure whether we're duplicating any of services that we're paying for, because there needs to be better coordination, I think. So we can look at that. Those are my comments. I don't know that we should open it up. I'm looking at the council now. If we should open up to anyone new, maybe we should just review the same ones that we have, but they might have to reapply and give us some more information, because this is coming from the COVID relief fund monies, and it has to be justified.
That's absolutely correct. So we could definitely do that as well, because there's going to be requirements that we need to provide to the federal government as it relates to that. We would want to make sure that their application covers that, so that we have a nexus. Understood.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So now we look forward to the presentation.
So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. If we can bring the PowerPoint up. And so I know we're getting a little bit of a late start, but I think we can be done by 6 o'clock we can be done within probably about 45 minutes of the budget workshop presentation. And what I'm going to ask is we're going to go through the presentation, and I'm going to respectfully ask that all the council members hold their questions until we get through. I know it's a lot of information to digest, but we can always pull up the slides as questions come up on the backside. So today we've already conducted the public hearing. We're now beginning the budget workshop for fiscal year 21-22. Next slide, please. So really quick overview. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be providing a budget overview. We're going to do a department budget highlights. We're going to go over our capital improvement program. There are going to be some city council decision packages that the council will have to deliberate on or give direction on. We've already conducted the hearing, and then we'll take any questions and comments from the council. Next slide. So on your budget transmittal, I want to highlight a couple of significant accomplishments for fiscal year 2021. So as you are aware, we have started the site-specific park master plan update for 5 parks. So that's a significant endeavor that's already begun. and been awarded, and we'll be coming back to council with those results. We've already brought back our concession evaluation, and council's given directions on that. So we're working on some new concessionaire services for all of our vacant concessionaires. We are making improvements to our electronic plans, submittal, and paperless permits. I know that we continually hear about trying to provide better services to those getting permits pulled. And so this electronic plan submittal process will enhance that service. We achieved North Beach National Registry status with our North Beach. So a great accomplishment for a historic district. And then we also expanded our Park Ranger Patrol program, which not only helps with parking enforcement, but helps with park closures and other, I'll say, nuisance monitoring within the city. So that's a great program that we brought forward. Current issues. So pandemic restrictions are being lifted, but there's still some questions in how the future will be. And to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, yes, now we're looking at an economic recovery. Homelessness continues to be a priority within the city as it relates to quality of life. And the city will continue to maintain our posture and position, mitigating any toll road expansions within the city of San Clemente. Next slide. So from the budget perspective, next slide. We've always provided a theme to our budgets. And so, you can see back in 16 and 17, we started taking the position of investing in today to protect tomorrow. As it related to our LTFP, well, again, we didn't identify a pandemic. We saw economic issues coming in our future. And so we have been preparing from our budget for the last 5 years to be prepared for really a good position as it relates to the pandemic. And so for this coming fiscal year, the city and its staff, while have weathered, major impacts and held steady in this environment, despite seemingly daily and weekly changes. And so this was, going to be a year of adapting and learning to get back into the groove with our operations. But I really want to give a shout out to our staff who really helped the city in these uncertain times hold steady and be able to continue to provide services. Next slide. So financial overview. So for the fiscal year 21-22 budget, all funds, now this does include one-times, revenues total about $153.5 million, which is a 4% increase from the previous fiscal year adjusted budget, while expenditures are budgeted at $166.4 million, a 16% decrease from the prior budget year. And we'll continue to have page numbers on these slides that you can reference for this specific information. For fiscal year 21-22 budget, general fund, which also includes one-times, we're seeing our revenues total about $70.5 million, which is a 5% increase from the previous fiscal year adjusted budget, while expenditures are budgeted at about $73.2 million, so about a 1% decrease from the previous year's budget. Next slide. Key themes for this budget, next budget cycle. We want to continue to maintain a strong financial foundation. We want to maintain our service level commitment as pandemic restrictions are eased, and we're going to continue to address quality of life issues in the city of San Clemente. Next slide. Cost mitigations. So this is important. So in the current budget year, we started with vacancies in the pandemic, and we indicated that in the current fiscal year's budget, and we ended up with quite a few vacancies as we closed out this fiscal year. I want to say we're at about 17 vacancies. We're in the process of filling some of those key positions, but we are going to maintain 7 positions vacant in the next fiscal year, which will provide us roughly almost $1 million in cushion in the event of any other economic hardships that may still not have not played out. Pension costs have also got a lower rate of growth, and it's important to note that in 2019, our LTFP brought into play pension reform with both a pension policy and other actions to start addressing the pension costs. And so we'll have a slide that goes into that in more depth. Our education assistance program for employees, we suspended it last budget year, and we've suspended it this year as well. This is for employees who want to apply for an education program to get a degree or other additional education to help them with their job. And so we've held frozen on that because of, again, uncertainty in preserving general fund dollars. And then also our general fund transfer to street improvement fund was maintained, but at a lower rate. And that'll be a different slide that will go into more detail. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn the reins over to Jake Ron, our financial services officer, who's going to give a budget overview. So Jake, if you would, please.
All right, so we'll go to the next slide. And again, this is just a budget overview. A quick look at all the funds. You have the governmental funds and the proprietary funds. The general fund is the main operating fund of the city. And as we talked about at LTFP, special revenue funds and capital projects. If you look all the way down on the bottom, we have the transit fund and the in lieu housing funds. Those were essentially the new adds during the year for funds. And we'll go to the next slide. All right, so as Eric said earlier, again, revenues for all the funds together, and that's both those governmental and proprietary funds, are 153.5 million. Expenditures are 166.4 million. And again, those are including all the one-time amounts. If you back out the one-time amounts, the operating revenues are about 136 million, and operating expenditures are about 126.7 million. All right, so the next slide shows the governmental fund, special revenue, capital projects, basically all the categories. And again, there's the 166.4 million. We'll go to the next slide, which focuses on the general fund. The general fund revenues and expenditures comparison. Again, this includes all one-time amounts. You can see last year we had 67.4 million and 73.9 million for expenditures. This year, again, including one times, we have 70.5 million for revenues and 73.2 million for expenditures. Now, the next slide shows the costs, backing out those one-time costs, which are typically for capital and one-time transfers to reserves. Last year, you can see we had the $100,000 operating position. Again, it was 68 million, and we had operating costs of 67.9 million. On this year, we have 70.5 million for revenues and 70.3 million for expenditures. And going to the next slide is just a picture of our operating position. Again, there's the 70.5 million. And once you back out those one-time capital costs and one-time transfers to our reserves, you have an operating position of $183,040.
Jake, really quick, just for the benefit, and I'll do a few interruptions. I really want to point out to the council and the audience at large, normally, we like to see our general fund operating position be between $500,000 to $1 million. Last budget year, we landed at about $120,000 for our general fund operating position. While it is in the positive, again, it is important to note this is not ideal for us because it's this fund that funds our one-time costs, be it capital improvement, be it IT strategic plan related things. And so when we're coming out at 183, it's a very tight budget. And so it's important to note, again, we would like to see this be between 500,000 to $1 million. However, you know, I'll take this as long as we can maintain a balanced budget, but it does put us in a much tighter position. Thank you, Jake.
And one thing I'll also point out, kind of alluding to Eric's point, this is 0.3% of the operating expenditures. So the 183 divided by the 70 million, again, that's a very narrow operating position, and we like to have a little bit more just as a cushion as we go throughout the year. So going on to the next slide, it shows the total general fund revenues. And that's for fiscal year 21-22. It's got the previous adjusted budget and the projected amount. It's 70.5 million. The dollar change is 3 million, so it's a 5% increase. And as you can see, the biggest dollar change is in taxes, and we'll go into those a little bit more. But I'll comment on the service charges, fines, and interest and rents. Again, as we come out of the pandemic and the restrictions are eased, we're anticipating higher revenues, essentially from recreation classes. And we've kind of talked about this on some of the monthly, quarterly reports. Service charges should come back a little bit. Fines should come back a little bit. And rentals, again, park rentals will increase also. So going on the next slide is property tax. And you can kind of see the rate of growth over the last 10 years. Again, it's 38.5 million. and that's from page 40. And a couple of the reasons on the next slide, you'll see the increase that we're doing from the adjusted budget is 3.7%. Kind of the past history from a taxable value, you can kind of see it's in the 4 to 5% range. And that recognizes that the CPI adjustment is not going to be the maximum 2% for the year. Again, that's something that comes out by the state. It's only 1.036%, I want to say. And there is also home sales and other growth related to that. So sales tax is on the next slide. And you can see, again, we kind of anticipated a little bit of a flattening from 1920 to 2021, and actually a decrease from 1819. That was probably, or mostly pandemic related. This year is actually shaping up a little bit better than we had budgeted. And our projected number is actually around 10.9 million. So that kind of leads into next year's 11.5 million for the sales tax. And on the next slide, again, it just kind of goes through, again, strong receipts for the current year, anticipated to continue for 21, 22, and online sales activity has been beneficial for the city. So moving on to the next slide, it's a picture of the general fund expenditures, and you can see overall it's about a $750,000 decrease. Again, that's adjusted budget to the budget comparison. And you'll see an increase dollar-wise in personnel. You might recall at mid-years, we came back with a lot of salary adjustments. I kind of took a look at last year's budget just to see what the personnel started at, and it was actually at 19.2 million last year. So essentially, without all those mid-year adjustments and adjustments through the course of the year, it would essentially be flat. Contractual services is flat, but again, police and fire contracts have gone up, but we've had other decreases in other categories. Other charges, the 152,000, that's primarily related to contract class instructors. So again, as recreation classes occur, we're going to have more costs related to that. And you'll kind of see those play out on the following pages or the following information. Other than that, the decreases are in a variety of categories. So the next slide, general fund expenditures by department. Again, general government's down, finance and administrative services down. As I said on the last slide, police, fire, marine safety are all showing 4 to 5% increases. Community development, public works down. Beaches, parks and rec, again, as those classes are going on, we're going to incur more costs. So that's kind of the increase there. And we'll kind of go through on departments, which start with the general government on the next slide. And you can kind of see overall, again, 12% decrease once you include everything. So there's just a snapshot, and we're going to go through the highlights on the next slide. The personnel changes, again, city manager position budget had to be reestablished. So that's primarily in the personnel category. Again, that was one of the areas that we came back at mid-year. We had that vacancy for a long period of time. So at mid-year, we reduced that salary to recognize that that position was vacant. We have the assistant to city manager position in the budget and the economic development officer position in the budget, which is being split between general government and community development. Contractual services, again, maintenance of computer software decrease, that's 102,000, and that's primarily related to a one-time IT strategic plan. Professional services decreases from 740,000 to 349,000. So a decrease of about 390,000. The CASA JPA contribution amount increases from 847,000 to 920,000. So an increase of about 73,000. And election expenses decreased by 109. Interfund transfers are 1.1 million, and they're outlined there. Again, included in those transfers is a transfer to the transit fund to assist in funding the trolley and SE rides program. Other amounts that are include the DBA for 34,000, downtime parking leases for 37,000, and 18,000 for the council contingency. And we reduced that amount to accommodate the Citizens Academy for the police. So on the next slide, we'll be going to finance and administrative services. Again, relatively flat, 3% decrease, and the highlights are on the following slide. Not really a lot of changes here. Again, we're maintaining 3 vacant positions in finance and administrative services. I believe that's the same amount of vacancies that we had in FAS last year. Contract services, advertising, just a $10,000 decrease. Professional, legal, and audit services, those kind of all together factored in, and we have about $118,000 decrease there. All right, and the next slide covers public safety, which includes police, fire, and marine safety. And again, you see the 4 to 5% increases. Overall, in total, it's about a 5% increase. And we're just gonna go through these kind of department by department, the highlights on the next slide. The first one is police services. Again, the total for police services is $19.4 million. And those costs include the OCSD police services contract and other costs to support those services and public safety services, fleet communication, citation processing, the RSVPs, crossing guards, and legal enforcement, and also the unfunded liability for past police. The police services contract by itself, again, is $18.1 million, and the general fund portion of that is $17.9 million. The contract cost increases by about $913,000, and it's a 5% increase. It's actually, I believe, 5.33%. There is a service level change. In that 5.33% is the addition of 1 community service officer position with their related costs. So the next slide is dealing a little bit more with fire and ambulance. Again, emergency services total is $12.6 million, and that includes the OCFA. And
one slide really quick, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So one thing I just want to point out on the service level change for the police services contract, both myself and Captain Manhart had a discussion, and the question was, anything. And if you remember, for years, we've always had 4 CSOs within our police contract. And I can't remember what fiscal year we reduced it to 3. However, I know council members have had a number of concerns from different parts of the community as it relates to parking enforcement. And so Ed's recommendation was to bring back another community services officer, which could help offset the parking issues that have been brought up. And so not an expensive position to fund. It's about 100,000, give or take, fully loaded. And we contribute revenue. Obviously, we increase parking revenue because of this additional body to provide parking enforcement. So it is our hopes, and I think Ed's hopes, and he feels confident now with the full complement of 4 CSOs, he has a good parking plan in place to address those parking concerns. And we also, it's a team effort. We have your RSVPs, and then we also have the park rangers. So we'll be better positioned to address parking enforcement going forward. I'm sorry, Jake, go ahead.
All right, so again, the next slide focuses on emergency services total, $12.6 million, and that includes the OCFA and the ambulance service contracts and the past fire staff UAL payment. The OCFA contract by itself totals $10.5 million, and $10.3 million is the base contract. And the contract increases by about $598,000, which is about a 6% increase. No service level change, but costs are increasing. You might remember there is a 4.5% cap. However, costs are increasing to address the 4th paramedic firefighter cost phase in. Sorry, I had trouble getting that out. Again, the $200,000 is basically for additional facility and vehicle costs. Ambulance services contract is about $1.4 million, and that provides 2 full-time ambulances, and the increase is about $53,000. So the next slide covers marine safety. Again, costs increased slightly from the previous year. Personnel costs are generally flat. Some of the supplies costs are increasing due to junior guard supplies. Again, that was one of those mid-year adjustments. We kind of came back and adjusted some of those down. So we're reinstating that budget. Capital costs increase for lifeguard tower replacements, and that would be the 100,000 for the capital projects costs, anticipated costs related to that. So on the next slide shows community development and just kind of overall snapshot of that. You can see overall a 13% decrease, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. Again, you have the community outreach worker that is CDBG funded. The recommendation is to change a park ranger from 3/4 time, FTE is a full-time equivalent, to a full-time employee, one position. Code compliance officer is being added to address water quality issues, and this corresponds with decreases to staff in the Clean Ocean Fund. Basically, also to reinstitute the Deputy Community Development Director position. Again, we kind of already covered the Associate Planner to the Economic Development Officer, and an Office Specialist to Senior Office Specialist. Supplies are decreasing by 30,000, and that's primarily due to like one-time office equipment. As you know, they kind of moved around on the first floor, and they had to get a couple of items related to that. So the next slide covers contract services, which decreased by almost $1 million. Again, you might remember the IT strategic plan costs of $292,000, and that's related to the Track It upgrade, which will facilitate a little bit more online activity. Legal services is decreasing by about $186,000, and that was due to a lot of STLU enforcement related costs in the previous year. Contract services decreased by $521,000. Again, this is in a variety of categories, and it's mostly for one-time items such as the housing element, wireless master plan, local coastal plan. Some inspection and plan check review services were lowered. And also, again, since we're having those staffing positions back, some of the contract assistance during vacancies was also reduced. So the next slide goes into Public Works and is an overview of the Public Works Department. Again, 4% decrease, about 17.4 million in total, and just in a variety of categories. And we'll go through some of the highlights in the next slide. Again, we're eliminating the emergency planning coordinator, the master and senior electrician. We're basically combining those and doing electrical coordinator, and they will have 3 vacant positions to provide budget savings in Public Works. Contract services decreased by 146,000. Again, this is primarily due to one-time activity and SC rides. Again, we moved that activity over to the transit fund. So a lot of that is the reason for the decrease there. Capital outlay is slightly lower. Again, recurring maintenance is kept, and we do have the 1.9 million in there for the sand replenishment project. The next slide shows beaches, parks, and recreation. Again, this is where you'll see the 13% increase that was on the previous slide. And the personnel, again, as we have those part-time staff come back in, going to the mid-years, we adjusted a lot of part-time staff down and other full-time staff for vacancies and vacancy amounts during the pandemic. So that's the 13% there. And we kind of already talked about the other charges, but we'll go into the highlights on the following slide. Personnel, one thing we're recommending is the recreation manager to the beaches, park, and recreation director. We do want to change a recreation supervisor to a management analyst. However, we're going to keep that management analyst position vacant for right now. Again, we think they'll benefit from a little bit more assistance at the higher levels, and then the reinstituting budgeted part-time hours for anticipated activity levels. Supplies increase is 8,900 due mostly to operating supplies. Again, as we execute programs, those costs will be needed. Contract services increased by 21,000. Again, that's mostly due to referees and officials costs. And other charges increased $236,000, and that's the contract class instructors costs that I mentioned earlier in the other charges area. So the next slide covers fund balance, and you can see it's 15.9 million. Again, we were able to maintain the 20% for the emergency reserve of 14.1 million, and unassigned fund balance is 1.9 million. And on the next slide, you can see, again, we kind of alluded to it earlier, American Rescue Funds, they're not included in the proposed 21-22 budget. City allocation is just under 7.5 million, and eligible uses would be pandemic response or COVID-19 economic impacts, government services to the extent of lost revenue, workforce personnel costs, and water, sewer, and broadband projects. For the staffing, we'll go into the staffing and pension a little bit. The next slide shows the full-time equivalents. Again, our net effect, and there's a lot more activity that goes on than just the 0.25. On page 323, there's a list of all the changes that we're making to better meet the needs of sorry, my light just went off. There we go. I'm back. I guess I was talking too much in one position. So full-time equivalents, again, fiscal year 2021, 196.11, and this is all funds. You can see it's an increase of just 0.25 in 21-22. And again, multiple reclassifications and adjustments to better meet service needs.
Jake, I want to pause on that really quick. Jake did cover the fact that our staffing changes are reflected in the summary on page 323. I think what I want to at least promote and just communicate to this public and the city council is, you know, as you'll see from that page 323, what we talk about is when we have a vacancy, we step back and we reevaluate. And so as you can see from this budget process, we stepped back and reevaluated a number of positions that became vacant to see how we could do them better and achieve cost savings. And the one thing that I'm proud of, but that I'm not proud of it, if you will, is we're able to maintain the same full-time equivalent count, give or take, other than the 0.25 increase, which in simple terms, you recognize that we had a lead park ranger working 3/4 time and we changed that position to full-time. That's really your 0.25 increase in terms of personnel. But more importantly, just to tell a little bit of a story, if you go to page 331 of your budget, you know, it's important to note that in 2017-18, we were at an FTE count of about 205. And then you saw us drop down by 5 to 2018-19 to 200. And then thereafter, we have basically stayed steady at 196. And again, it's going to be a constant theme within this presentation and the budget in the next fiscal year. We've got an amazing set of staff. And so I know if you asked any employee, they would say, I need more positions to do better at planning, or I need more positions to do better to keep the pools operating at the best level that we want or can. But we're going to continue to work within our box of working with what we have and be very mindful of adding more on top of that, because obviously adding additional bodies brings in pension liability into the discussion and a number of other things, especially as it relates to uncertainty in the revenue streams in the future years. And while I would say this is the most optimal personnel process that we can do without bringing in new positions. And we've had meetings with all of the departments to make sure that we didn't miss something and we're not imposing something that would not be complementary or beneficial to those operations. And each of the departments were fantastic and coming in with an open mind and looking at how things can be done a little bit differently. And so I would be remiss if I didn't kind of give that shout out. So thank you. And Jake, please proceed.
And again, just going to Eric's comment, again, we're maintaining 7 vacancies within the general fund, 3 in the FAS, 3 in public works, and 1 in beaches, parks, and rec. So again, that's kind of everybody chipping in to make sure that things are moving forward. So the next slide and this is kind of, we just brought it over from the LTFP. Again, it's 68% funded status, and you've already seen this as part of the LTFP. But one thing on the next slide, I do want to point out that during the course of fiscal year 2021, we were able to accomplish making an additional 1.3 million in additional payments. Again, this is above and beyond what the actuarial requirements were. The marine safety plan, we did a pay down of the pension liability of about 79,000, safety plan about 525,000, miscellaneous plan of 185,000, and in the CSIR plan, 550 was allocated from the CASA available fund balance. So going on to the next slide is we're just getting into the other funds. And the next slide shows just by fund kind of various highlights or things going on. Capital improvement and gas tax, again, just street projects going on. Miscellaneous grants fund, you have the sidewalk improvements and also the social services grants that are being funded from that one. Police grants, again, as in the past, we have the deputy positions which are being funded. Or a portion of the positions being funded. Local transit fund, again, trolley operations and the SE rides programs were moved over into this fund to kind of break it out from the general fund and the AQMD fund. Funding is being provided by the general fund and various OCTA grants. The next slide goes into park acquisition and development fund. In that, we have the Linda Lane Park Restroom and ball netting projects. There's 2 projects related to that, and more information is in the CIP Capital Improvement Program section of the budget. Storm drain improvements for 850,000, again, CIP project. Developers Improvement Fund, again, there's a big transfer out, and that's for the in lieu affordable housing. To break out in a separate fund, and that includes transfers for loans and available funds. The Reserves Capital Projects Fund, we had the Beach Trail Steel Bridge replacement and various pier projects. All right, next slide kind of gives a snapshot of the enterprise funds. Again, you had the utilities which operate under this, and this kind of our proprietary ones where fees are charged to cover the cost, and the government or the Gulf operating budget. So on the next slide, it kind of goes into the water sewer. Water operating costs go from 3.9 million to 24.2 million. So again, that's about a 1% increase. Sewer operating costs are essentially staying flat at 11.1. With the sewer fund, I just do want to point out that a sewer cost of service study is nearing completion and new rates will be needed. I think the last time rates were adjusted in the sewer fund was about in 2013. So there's been no increases since that time frame. Clean Ocean operating costs are going from 3.4 million to 1.8 million. And some of this is due to lower improvement transfers. Again, capital projects were done in the improvement reserve. So those transfers are going down. In addition, we have lower personnel costs because we're shifting some of the water quality responsibilities over to code compliance. And contract services, I didn't list this one down, but that one's going down by about 121,000. So golf operating costs are going from 2.4 to 2.5 million, and that's primarily related to the addition of the golf course marshals and related items. So the capital improvement fund or capital improvement program, which is on the next slide. We're just going to go into some of the bigger ones, but on the next slide, you can see capital projects there's 32 projects for a total of 21 million. And this is across all funds. Maintenance, again, 30 projects, 5.5 million. Some of the significant projects that I want to point out, OCSD substation, again, that one's been budgeted this current year, but it's in process. Beach Trail Steel Bridges replacement, 2 million. Santa Margarita Water District Trampus Recycle Water Reservoir, 3.1 million. Sand Replenishment Project for 1.9 million. And we just have a couple of pictures on the following slides, just to give a little bit of context. Again, Beach Trail Steel Bridge replacement, additional 2 million is being added in fiscal year 2022. 3 million was already budgeted in fiscal year 2021. The next slide, is kind of an overview on the Santa Margarita Water District Trampus Recycled Water Reservoir. And the next one is the Sand Replenishment Project Santa Margarita Water District, we have the 3.1 million, which is being allocated, and this primarily to buy into that reservoir, and that will help us with recycled water storage, which will help us meet it during, I'll call it, seasonal needs. The next slide shows the Sand Replenishment Project. Again, 1.9 million is being funded, and we're going to continue to seek grants to offset those costs. So the next slide, we're going to go into budget enhancements. And again, these are kind of called out in the transmittal letter on page 19. You have the Citizens Academy, as I spoke to before. The 16.5 was funded from council contingency. And then we're doing the Steed Park batting cage replacement. And these are general fund ones that are both ongoing and one-time. The next slide shows some of the other fund enhancements. Again, we have the ammonia analyzer for water sewer, utility golf cart for the golf course marshals, and solid waste and recycling agreement consultant. So a total other funds of 132,000. The next slide, we're going to go in, and those were all included in the proposed budget before you. Now we're moving into, I'll call it city council decision items. These are items that we did not include in the budget, and we just seek council's direction a little bit more on these to figure out whether we should incorporate them into the budget or not. So on the next slide is item number 1. This would be an ongoing cost, and it's for the automated license plate reader system. And again, this is kind of coming out of the Public Safety Committee, and the appropriation request is $41,250. The item number 2 is the Mariposa Beach Trail handrail. And this is not going to be ADA compliant, but it will offer assistance to individuals. The appropriation request is $35,000. And item number 3 is the Avenida Victoria sidewalk widening. Again, both 2 and 3 were initiated by council, and they asked for these to be brought back as part of the budget discussion. The appropriation request for this one is $425,000. So with that, that is pretty much the whole presentation, and we're available for any questions that you might have.
So Mayor, if you want to we'll take questions from the council, and then at the end we'll circle back with the decision packages and get direction from the council on those 3 decision packages, if that's.
Yes, so you don't want us to talk about the decision packages right now?
If the council wants to get the decision packets out of the way and then deal with questions in the budget, I'm amenable to either, but I figured there'd probably be a number of questions and then we could do the decision packages.
Yeah, let's just get to any general questions first. It's 5:15. Just want to bring that up. Okay.
Mayor, I have a quick question right out of the gate regarding the revenues and expenditures. Would that be for you, Jake or Eric?
Please ask the question. Is it relative to a slide that we already looked at? So we can.
It's actually very relevant to the overall budget. I've worked at several government agencies, as you all know, and I've never seen a government agency adopt a budget in which the expenditures exceeded the revenues for the year. They're always revenues are always come in and are more than what the expenditures are, right? So you don't want to exceed your budget and spend more than what you're bringing in. So like we have 153.5 in revenue, but we're spending $166.4 million. Can staff explain that to me and the public watching? Because that is unusual. That is absolutely not customary at every agency I worked at.
So it's a great question. I've been at a number of agencies, and this practice is not out of the norm, but I will communicate how it plays out. And so let's use an example of the forthcoming budget year where the council, decides to approve the purchase or the CIP project of the Mariposa Bridge Trail. And for the sake of this example, let's just say it's going to be $4 million. So in fiscal year 21-22, you authorize a contract and you initiate the CIP for $4.5 million for the bridge. That project is now funded, and those monies are allocated for that CIP project. There's a great likelihood that that CIP project will not be completed within that fiscal year. And so while some of those dollars may be spent in the forthcoming fiscal year, not all of them will be spent. And so what happens is that remaining expenditure is carried over to the next fiscal year. And the revenue that was associated to it, and revenue is not the right word, the funding associated to it was established in the previous fiscal year. So that comes over with its budget into the next fiscal year. The revenue column only speaks to revenues being received in that fiscal year. So while it does look like you're spending more than you're making or generating, not the case. Those are all previously funded one-times that were funded in previous fiscal years that carry over into the next fiscal year. And in some cases, some projects take a couple of years. So you'll see those dollars, while they lower each year, they continue to carry over until the project is closed out, which is via city council action, as you notice of completions, et cetera. And so that really addresses that issue. But it's a good point, because for the person that just doesn't know that and sees from the screen, they'll automatically assume they're spending more than they're bringing in.
Right, and other agencies just do it differently than what you're doing here then. So that's understood. It's not a real life snapshot of the budget. So that's fine. Thank you for your explanation on that and how we're doing that. And I know we're going to talk later as a council, but this second question, there are several promotions or reinstatement of position, deputy high-paying position, I would imagine, deputy community development director, then a promotion to a director of beaches, parks and recreation, and then an office specialist, senior office specialist. I know we're not adding positions, but we're adding money. So our personnel costs are going up despite not adding positions. But what's the justification? I just wrote a few down. What are the justification for those positions? I didn't see it in the budget.
So for instance, with the Deputy Community Development Director, that is a position that we've had in previous budget cycles. For some of you who may remember, we formerly had Bill King, who was our Deputy Community Development Director, who abruptly and then suddenly passed away. That position was responsible for two divisions at the time, code enforcement and the building division. And when the city planner position became vacant with the departure of Gabriel Perez, we reevaluated, again, going back to my previous statement of looking at the vacant position to see how we could do it and do it better. And so we realized that we could probably, and it's a little bit of an increase from where the city planner's position was, but now we'll be able to have potentially two divisions within that responsible zone or that position of the deputy CD director, keeping in mind the city planner was just responsible for one division. So that person will take on more responsibility. And then the hopes are that obviously some of the positions within the organization we'll look at to see if we can do something different with them. With the Beaches, Park and Recreation Director, that's a great question as well, Councilmember Ferguson. When we did not have a BPR director, the city took the BPR department and broke up the divisions. And so I assumed the role of the BPR director, if you will. I took over the golf division. Marine safety went to the city manager's office, and then recreation stayed with the recreation manager. As things have changed, we have decided to put golf back into BPR. So now there's the golf division and the rec division. And with marine safety, we have realized that the best location for them is back in BPR. So that division is also added back to the Department of Beaches, Park and Recreation. Some of those other divisions that were there that are not going back were park planning and park maintenance, which if you remember, I'm speaking to one council member that was here when we did the transition of maintenance from BPR to Public Works. So we increased the responsibility of the recreation manager's position with bringing in an additional two divisions. And so I felt it was appropriate for that recreation manager position to be reclassified into a BPR director. And so while not adding a position, but basically upgrading that position because of the increase in responsibilities they received.
Well, thanks for your explanation.
And Mr. Sund, it kind of goes along with, we had two city managers and both of you were taking care of those departments, and now we have one. So we're giving more responsibility to the BPR manager and making her director to reflect that.
Correct. And I mean, and one of the points as we made earlier is the assistant city manager position remains vacant. We're not filling it. And so as the city manager, I also assume the responsibilities of the assistant city manager, which per the municipal code, it basically puts me in the position of the finance administrative services director with regards to budget adoption and other types of things. And so for the time being, I will wear those two hats. You know, again, we're all doing less with more, but we all recognize that at the end of the day, a balanced budget is key. And so I think, you know, we all want to show a little bit of our sacrifice to ensure that we have a strong budget.
So that was one of my questions, is how we're getting by with 3 positions open in finance. So that's because you are continuing to take on the duties of helping with the budget.
Correct. And we have those 3 positions also include a vacant accounting position and another position. And quite honestly, I would love to fill those positions, but I think it's super important to lead by example so that other departments realize that I'm also making sacrifices as it relates to vacant positions. If it was untenable, I wouldn't recommend it. However, it's working right now. Will it work forever? Probably not, but it's working right now. And we have a great team that supports me that makes it easier to achieve.
Okay, so I appreciate that. I just want, you know, this year's going to be an experiment where we all don't know how everything's going to open, and we're going to be making adjustments. But when the city, if, you know, everything keeps going forward through this year, by the end of the year, we're going to probably have to start filling positions.
I think, you know, again, we come back to you on a quarterly basis with updates as we've normally done. And so we'll continue to do that. And as we see positive changes in our budget as it reflects revenues, we'll then recommend some of those positions to be filled. But it's important to note, I made the comment about 17 vacant positions. You know, HR, my human resources division, is maintaining 1 vacancy. So they are operating currently at 2 people, but normally a fully staffed is 4. We're in the process of about 10 different positions that need to be filled, but those recruitment processes take time. And so I got to give a huge shout out to our HR manager, Hannah Thordahl, who's really spinning a lot of plates, but we already concluded an internal promotion on 4 positions. And then we're going to be recruiting again on another platform for another 4. So we're prioritizing and doing those recruitments as best we can and as quickly as we can.
And then I just have another really quick question. And I might have just lost it when I looked at the Mayor Pro Tem.
It happens.
Sorry about that. I try to wear a lot of hats. Oh, are other cities actually using the American Rescue Funds in their budget already?
So the answer is yes. I have had a chance to talk to a number of my peers at other agencies, and a couple of cities that were already, I'll say, having financial issues before the pandemic only magnified those financial issues. And for a number of cities that I've talked to, they are balancing their budget by using the federal dollars as a placeholder within their budget. And it's important to note, they haven't even received those dollars yet, but they are in a position where they have very little options to do so. And so it's extremely important. And as a council member, I can't express the fact that we can deliver a balanced budget in this climate. And if you look at a number of other cities who were adversely affected by the pandemic, San Clemente is in a very fortunate position. And part of that, and I've said this before consistently, is it's partly contributed to our revenue makeup. We don't heavily depend on sales tax. We heavily rely on property tax, which is about 53% of our revenue. And we don't rely on transient occupancy tax, which is roughly about $2 million, whereas other cities heavily rely on transient occupancy tax or heavily rely on sales tax to basically make up the majority of their revenues. Our makeup is a really optimal makeup for a pandemic. Who knew? But it's important because if you're dependent on hotel taxes and you have hotels that close down, you don't have another stream of revenue to offset that.
No, I appreciate that. That was just one question I wanted to ask because I want to make it clear to everyone that those funds are not in this budget yet.
Nor are any use of reserves to provide this balanced budget, Mayor.
Okay, Thank you.
I forgot, excuse me, Mayor Ward, I forgot earlier I mentioned I wanted to hear how come the city manager's budget had risen, gone from 347,000 to 741,000. It's about $750,000 budget now, that's 73%. Can you increase? Could you tell us about that, please?
Let's go back to slide 22, please, and then I'll defer to Jake to provide that overview.
Slide 22. Do we know what page that is?
Let me see. It's like, is Jake driving?
No, it's page 112 of the budget.
Thank you.
And then slide 22 from the PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah. So if you look at page 112 of the budget, you kind of see the different categories that make up the city manager. Personnel costs is increasing. Again, as I said earlier, at mid-year, we came back with mid-year adjustments, and there was a large reduction because we had the vacant city manager position that was unfilled during the course of the year. So we reduced the staffing costs significantly in that area. So if you look at the category expenditure summary on page 112, you'll see personnel costs actually going up 89%. And keep in mind, there's really, I'll call it two significant personnel. One of those is the city manager that's charged to the city manager budget. So that's, I'll call it the most significant reason for the large increase. Contractual services is going down by 78%, and other charges is going up 38%, but that only totals about $1,000 to $2,000. So it's primarily related to, I'll call it, that reinstituting of the city manager salary, because again, we didn't have a city manager for pretty much all of most of this fiscal year. So we took away those savings and we realized those savings as part of the mid-year adjustments.
Thanks, Jake. I noticed we're missing an individual too in the city manager's office. I count 4 in my head that I know work in the city manager's office. So I don't know why it says 3, but anyway, I do know of 4 people in that department. I won't name them now, but anyhow, but thanks. That's a lot of money. But I just would like to see us just absolutely eliminate the assistant city manager job altogether, because we've proven, I mean, our city's built out and we've proven we can get by with one. I know Mayor Ward said we had 2, and we did for a long time, but for the last year we've had 1. So we should just eliminate that altogether and put that savings towards something like our reserves, emergency reserves, or unfunded pension liabilities. I'd like to see us do that in the future. Thanks for doing that.
Mayor Pro Tem, did you have some questions?
I have a couple of questions. Let's talk about, right now we have an interim contract public works director.
Yes, sir.
Does that go against contract services or does that go against public works?
We take, the simple answer is it goes against contract services and public works.
Contract services within public works. When we had a contract city manager, did those dollars go against the city manager's office or against contract services?
They went against the city manager's budget, but under contract services.
That's not actually what my question was, but when we went down that road, I wanted to clarify that. Let's talk public safety. I don't know if we've ever fully had our deputies fully staffed here. It seems like we always have vacancies. It's issues beyond Captain Manhart, beyond police services. So this is not a dig at police services. So that kind of concerns me that we don't actually capture that very well. We don't We don't forecast that very well. That's number one. Number two, we have a lot of issues with parking in this town, a lot of issues. We have a lot of nuisance issues here that have really not within the purview of police services or the deputies. Some are, some aren't. I'm just looking at some of the nuisance and parking issues we have. They might be more efficiently dealt with the use of community service officers, particularly for parking, if we increase the number of community service officers. And we would have a return on investment with those community service officers who are focused on not so much support to the deputies, but focus on parking infractions and quality of life issues, particularly as it relates to T Street. Additionally, maybe an increase in our park ranger program as well, if they were 632 qualified, so they could write parking tickets. What are your thoughts on that? And for that matter, what would Captain Manhart's thoughts on that be?
Well, those are great questions, and I appreciate you asking them. And I'm going to ask Captain Manhart to come up. Before I give him the floor, we've had these discussions as it relates to vacancies, and I do want to point out that obviously the COVID pandemic provided a unique challenge to OCSD, as it did to all of our public safety agencies, in terms of having that availability to bring people in, and so there were some limitations. I would love nothing more than be able to forecast vacancies, but it is a very difficult process. We, in our police services contract, we have historically budgeted about $200,000 for vacancy credit, meaning we anticipate upwards of about $200,000 in credits from a vacancy. And those vacancies can occur from anything: workers' comp issues, or out on leave, or whatever the case may be. I know Captain Manhart will speak to the vacancy, I'll say, forecast that he has coming forward, which I think is good news. And then also I'll let Captain Manhart speak to the parking enforcement, where I believe he feels very good and confident with the addition of another CSO. He will now have the right complement of staff to address parking issues in the city of San Clemente. With that said, obviously, if CSOs could manage the majority of the parking enforcement, that does free up park rangers to address other issues, i.e. nuisance and so forth. I know Adam Atamian, our code compliance manager, would love nothing more than some part-time monies to go into the bucket for park rangers, because much like all of our other employees, they're doing more with less. And so, they work till, over midnight every night, and they're involved in the T Street and beach clearing out and other things as well. But I'll defer to Captain Manhart to speak to the vacancies and the CSO.
Real quick before we go to Captain Manhart, Adam would prefer park rangers over an additional code compliance officer.
Now, I'm not going to speak for Adam, but because of the shifting of water quality enforcement action to code enforcement, I feel that another code enforcement officer would be appropriate, so that code department or code division has the right amount of staff to not only enforce our building codes, our planning codes, but also now, of course, our water quality codes.
And I'm not looking to increase staff. That's not what I'm. But when I look at one deputy cost us $320,000.
It's roughly about $325,000 fully loaded.
$325,000. I don't want to send shockwaves through OCSD, but it appears to reduce by one deputy. That would give us some leverage in the budget to do some other things.
Understood.
Well, let's back up a year. So a year and a half, mid-year, we were at reviewing the contract, and at that point, I think it was probably $40,000-$50,000 over budget. So I was filling the vacancies that we had, hence the pandemic. So this is the first time right now, we're coming up in about 12 months where we've been in nothing but a pandemic. So that last year, the first 6 months, the second 6 months of the budget cycle, we ended up giving back over $300,000 because we had staffing challenges, right? So with the pandemic, our shifts were split. We could not cross over and fill those vacancies. And that caused problems. Hence, that's why you guys got the money back. Well, that continued all the way through the year. This is a full year of it. And that's why you're seeing the benefit of that. Let's talk vacancies. Vacancies, I had a meeting this week with the Field Training Bureau. Currently, I have 3 vacancies. So July 2nd, I will receive the 3 trainees, and we will not have any vacancy deputy positions in the city. So I understand your concerns about traffic. Traffic has always been a challenge in the city. We should have always had 4 CSOs to handle that. We have 2 on the night that are split. And then that way, if we get another one, I had transitioned. The 1 CSO position we had was an administrative position, and the need is out in the field. And so I'm kind of, as Erickson is talking about, kind of passing off some other responsibilities with my people to get that CSO out in the street, in which she's doing right now currently. So by providing us the additional CSO, we will have 7 days a week, days and nights, we'll have CSOs to address those issues. And I'm very comfortable that that will be sufficient. I have a very concern with public safety eliminating deputies positions. If you were paying attention last year with all the civil unrest and issues, or how many deputies, in addition, I would never support anything like that. I mean, you guys, you're going to do or recommend what you want to do, but I would absolutely never recommend that. Public safety to me is paramount. Parking issues are important, dramatically important to the city, and I understand that. But public safety trumps that by far. So I'm not in support of that, but this is your decision to make that. But I'm telling you right now, July 2nd, I'm not going to have 1 vacancy.
Captain Manhart, I was paying attention.
Then that wouldn't be an issue then. Then we would not be talking about losing a deputy if we saw the challenges that we have.
Okay,
which
I've had it. Okay, that's enough.
So
Questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
I don't have another question, Captain Manhart.
Eric, it'd be good to have the code enforcement manager too get out in the field more. I know he's basically in the office, and we could use him out in the field and have a voice machine on to take the calls and so forth, and get them at the end of the day, since we do have a 24-hour return call policy. But that would help to get him out in the field, much like the building departments get out in the field too, the supervisors. So that could really help, even if it was just a couple of hours a day, I think.
That's a great point, Councilmember Ferguson. I do know that our code compliance manager is out on the field on a regular basis. And so when there's...
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. I know last year I was told he wasn't. So thank you. That's good note.
Is out on the field on a consistent basis supporting his code enforcement officers.
and a lot of meetings, I think. So Mayor Pro Tem, I'm going to ask you, were you thinking, because we've had openings within the deputies, that they have not been where the boots are not on the ground, even though we've allocated it? Are you thinking of taking one of those and seeing where it could go into our other programs like Rangers or something like that?
I mean, it appears to me that nuisance issues are one of the things that really are a concern to our citizens. T Street, we've had a number of issues in T Street. It just appears to me that having an additional park ranger or additional community service officer would free deputies from doing that. So that's all I'm saying. I thought it was worthy of discussion. It's not where I'm saying I'm going at this time, but I did want to throw it out because I think it's something we should consider.
Mayor Ward?
Yes.
I had the opportunity to do a ride along, thanks to Captain Manhart. Thank you, Captain Manhart. It was illuminating and exhausting. Late on Sunday night, I got to see the value up close of the CSOs, actually, because in a number of instances, I was really surprised the deputies were engaged in a situation and the CSO kind of came out of nowhere. And this was the middle of the night to assist and potentially do a traffic report, something like that, free them up to go back out and patrol because the CSO could do the paperwork. I think, Mayor Pro Tem James, that I think we're going to get the fourth, right? Like, let's see how that works and see if that makes a dent in some of the nuisance issues, the parking issues. But I think, but we'll also get to see, as I understand it, a fully staffed deputy corps too. So
if those 3 deputies
sure.
make it through their field training,
if they do, but at least we have the chance to see how that might play out. So I think your points are well taken. I think I'd like to see what it's like almost full staffed or just about full staffed on the deputy end, 4 CSOs, and see if we can get a handle on some of these nuisance issues that keep popping up, and then we can reassess. But I think, again, you're right on target in terms of that's where we're seeing some issues from the public that we want to address. I think we're in a good position now to potentially do it. And let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it would be good to throughout the year, as we are trying to open and no one knows what it's going to be like, that we do reevaluate, all of us, with our sheriff's department, but look at where we can use the money the best and operate the best, just to see what the issues are going to be this next year. But I agree, I'd like to see everything fully staffed, but you know, I want to see if that's beneficial. But I do want those conversations to be had throughout the year, because, you know, we're all trying to figure out what's going on and what's going to work. And we may know this year, we may not know. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty of what this year's going to be.
And myself and Ed have had these discussions, and we know we are going to continue to have these discussions post July 1. I think it's important to note again, and I dare bring up the matrix study, but one of the things that we came out of the matrix study is really just focusing on the goal of getting 100% staffing and filling the vacancies. And then to your point, to all the council members' point, once we're at 100%, let's see how things are. And so it's great to hear from Captain Manhart that we're going to be at that point. And I understand the disclaimer that some, you know, let's hope they all pass, but some may not, just because of the nature of the position. But I think, you know, and it's being resonated very loudly tonight that we want to continue to monitor that, to see how that affects our services. And I think you as council members will be the first ones to attest, either the phone calls and emails go away, or they stay the same, or they go up. And that helps judge whether or not they're being effective in those areas as it relates to quality of life.
I will go forward and go with the budget as with public safety as articulated here. But I will caveat that by saying, as we get into the summer and the T Street situation doesn't improve, I think we'll have to relook it.
Yeah. You know, we're all hoping that it'll be an orderly opening, but, you know, we'll find out.
And obviously, you know, we're all nervous with regards to this summer, because coming out of a pandemic, everyone is ready to get out there and have a good time, which we all are in that position. And so we do anticipate large crowds. And so we'll be mindful of that.
Okay. So Councilmember Knobloch, yes, go ahead.
Yes, I had a question going back to the license reader on the council items that are under consideration, the $41,000 a year. The license reader indicates phase 1. How many phases are there? And is this ongoing cost for technology or for new systems, or what is that, Eric?
Great question, Councilmember Knobloch. And so when we originally started looking at the flock camera system, that's the provider of the cameras, we came up with some tentative price quotes. And for simplification purposes, it's about $2,500 a camera a year. And so we're renting the cameras. We don't own the infrastructure. It means it's maintained by Flock and the cloud that they have with regards to the storage of the data. When the Flock proposal went to the Public Safety Committee and they deliberated on it, they basically came up with 3 levels of cameras. One was low, medium, and high. The high was in excess of $90,000 and the medium was around $80,000. And what I did is I took that middle recommendation from Public Safety Committee and I cut it into 2 phases. So phase 1 this fiscal year, and then phase 2 in the next fiscal year. These costs can always be, we're not locked in. So if we decide we want to take cameras off, or if we decide we want to go a different direction, we are not bound to a long-term contract with Flock. And also it's important to note that we are, with this $41,000, if my memory serves me correct, we're getting about 15 cameras with this phase one. But one of the really kind of appealing and unique situations is the Talega HOA has about 10 cameras already deployed. And so as part of that implementation, those cameras would be connected to our network of 15. So in essence, we're paying for 15, but we're really going to end up with 25. And those 15 are going to go at significant points in the city where there's enter and exit with regards to that. So
Eric, are the 10 being paid for, being rented by the same vendor?
Yes, they are of the Flock platform.
Okay, thank you. The technology compatible with facial recognition?
These are completely license plate readers. So they just look at the license plate. Obviously, part of that includes the car and the color of the car. Okay. This is all for the license plate readers only. There is no facial recognition as part of these cameras. Okay, if I could go back to a question that Councilmember Ferguson asked at the beginning about the expenditures versus revenues. That was a concern of mine as well. Eric, you mentioned as an example, the bridge, it's contracted for now, it's a large amount, but it's not spent now. So it looks like expenditures exceed revenues. And I assume that was just an example, but what projects do we currently have to cover the 2.7 million in increased expenditures over revenues? Are there specific projects that constitute that number? There are projects. I'm sure there's more than just a few projects that constitute that. I'll defer to Jake in terms of if we can identify what of the one times are in that, but maybe he can give some high level examples of some CIPs that contribute to that dollar amount.
Before you answer, just let me premise your response and my question by saying, just like we create the expenditure now, but we don't fund it now, can't we split the payments and the expenditures so that the real cost goes to when the real service or object is provided, so that it doesn't look like, I'm really concerned with passing any kind of a budget where our expenditures exceeds our revenue. So with that in mind, can you shift the numbers so that the numbers get spent at the same time that the product or the service gets delivered?
The easiest way to give an example is if you look at page 57 of the budget. It's called the All Funds Budget Summary. Right. And it goes through line by line for each of the funds. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of see the activity. Again, you have the fund balance that you're starting the year with. For example, I'll do the street improvement one. We have fund balance of about 1.6 million.
Where's that at on that page?
Sorry, the first one in special revenue funds.
Okay.
We have fund balance of about 1.6 million. You'll see revenues coming in of about 1.8 million. Mm-hmm. Budgeted expenditures are 2.8 million, but fund balance is still ending up at 549,000. So essentially, we're utilizing fund balance for past revenues that were received. And again, sometimes projects last multiple years or they come in under budget, and that kind of has a tendency to bolster that fund balance. So the changes in fund balance column is really, I'll call it the snapshot that offers a little bit more perspective as to how money is coming in, how it's flowing, where you're ending the year, I'll call it for your savings account. And you can kind of take a look and see where, I'll call it, the uses of fund balance are. I'll call it the negative balances. And like if you go down in the enterprise funds, about halfway down, you'll see a $3 million or $3.6 million use of fund balance. That would be that Santa Margarita Water District Trampus Reservoir. So again, we've received that funding in previous year from connection fees, and we're utilizing those funds to carry out a capital project that is related to those funds. So hopefully that gives a little bit of perspective. Again, we want to have a realistic picture of what's in our checking account. Essentially, this is us writing the checks so that we can get our true checking account balance, kind of going through that budget or the bank reconciliation. So we know what's in our checking account. Again, at the end of the year, we're anticipating having over $100 million in our checking account for all the funds. So hopefully that gives a little bit more perspective and gives you a little bit more comfort.
It does. I'm concerned about the optics. It's like saying, well, I'm a pauper because I made $2,000 this month, but my bank account's got $150,000 in it.
Yeah.
People are looking at, gee, you're broke. What's your problem? And when we pass a budget with expenditures exceeding revenues, maybe we could take some of those the revenues and somehow account for those in a way that makes it appear that these expenditures are covered, as opposed to it looks like you've just the opposite. You're expending more than you're bringing in. I'm just concerned about the optics.
Okay, and that's a little bit. If you look on page, sorry, I'm referring to the budget probably a little bit too much for you, but
no, not really.
Again, if you look at page 35, that's where we try to give a little bit of perspective, that bottom chart. And that kind of goes through, okay, all the revenues, the all fund revenues for 21-22 is 153 million or 153.5 million. Once you back out the one-time revenues of 0.8 million, transfers to other funds, that's primarily related to that in lieu. You have 136 million. On the all fund expenditure side, you have the 166 as the budgeted expense. Once you back out capital outlay, those transfers and other one-time costs, you really have 126. So
yeah, no, Jake, I understand.
Okay.
I understand. My point is, your explanation when the SC Times says they've approved a budget of which exceeds revenues by $3 million. No one's going to say, and if you go to page 35, you'll explain. You're going to say, this is our budget, these are our expenditures. What the heck's going on? I'm just saying, is there some finances language that can somehow address that? I'm just troubled by it. I understand that money is being held for items that have been will be spent in the future, and I appreciate that. But I'm just concerned about the optics.
Okay.
So Jake, I know governmental fund accounting, you've got to account for every penny in every fund, and you recognize your expenditures only in the year that you do them. I get that. But is there a way when we report our budget that we say we did this, and then we spent this many funds, that's over our revenues on projects from other funds, or some way to say it so that that portion is accounted for, so that people can see we have a balanced budget, and we end up with 180 something thousand.
It's almost like there needs to be a separate page explaining that.
Well, not just that, but when we report it out, I know governmental accounting, there's things that we have to do, but could we say it in a different way that
just
what he's saying?
Take out the capital outlays. Correct. Make that
and say that came from capital outlay
and
funds.
say those are multi-year, so they're not a good reflection of the.
And I appreciate Councilmember Knobloch and Councilmember Ferguson pointing this out. When we come back for budget adoption, we can definitely ensue that our presentation goes a little bit further in clarifying that as part of, here are your true costs that you're incurring within your general fund in fiscal year 21-22. Here are your true revenues that are going to cover those expenditures. But then separately, here are the add-on one-time costs that we include in our budget, but we'll separate those so that you can see those completely separated from what we'll call the true costs of that upcoming fiscal
I think
year.
it's just another way of reporting it, but I understand the funds have to reflect exactly how they do. I
appreciate Councilmember Knobloch helping me before the San Clemente Times runs with a story like that, so I'll take that.
Yeah, we don't want
that. One other question I have, Mayor Ward. In the overall, just a general comment, in the overall public safety issue, we've got police and fire making up the bulk of those costs, of course. I think the priority of our town ought to be police safety. And a little bit of a concern I have, a while back, the council approved a fourth person on the fire engines. And that was because of staffing problems with city, the OCFA having people on both sides of the city line, San Clemente and Dana Point. And when you have 3 people on a truck, one person gets pulled away temporarily. Someone has to come from Dana Point. And so to balance that out, we'll put 4 people on a fire engine. My concern is that rather than add a 4th person on every truck, I don't know that we need to, if we even should, revisit that issue. But my experience has been that there are not a lot of fires in San Clemente. There's a lot of emergency medical calls. That's where the service really is. And my experience, and I'm not ubiquitous in being at every event in town, but when I see a fire truck arrive, several come, and you've got 6 or 7 guys sitting around for when really 1 or 2 are doing the work, attending to the person. There's a lot of excess personnel. I guess what I'm saying is I'm really questioning the need for that 4th person and the costs that are related to it. So that's just a sort of an observation concern that I have. And I know the council's already done that, and we're now budgeting for it. And now we're paying now for what the council did a cycle ago. So that's a concern of mine.
So Councilmember Noblock, I'm seeing our division chief, Rob Capobianco, is on the
Yeah,
meeting.
I see him. Maybe he can respond to that.
Respond to that. You could probably say it way better than I could of why we added that 4th firefighter.
I was going to try and respond, but I see Chief.
No, as soon as he came up, I'm
well,
like,
I had a ride along with the OCFA as well, and we went into this. So I'll defer to you, Rob, on that, explaining it.
Great. Well, I appreciate the question, Councilmember Noblock. It's a good question, and I'm getting a warning on here saying it's unstable. You guys can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So a little bit about what happened back in 2014. When we were notified, as well as the city, that the hospital was going to be closing in town, we started studying the effects. And once again, as OCFA, it was not our position to evaluate the business decisions of the city, and as well as Memorial with the pulling out of the hospital from San Clemente. But our job was to evaluate and mitigate the impacts to public safety. You're absolutely right. There are some justifications to a 4th person on a fire engine for firefighter safety, getting an effective fire force to an incident. There's a lot of that. But that wasn't part of the decision back in 2014 when we started looking at this. In 2017, when we started the phased in cost share of this project, the main reason was we looked at and we came up with 2 recommendations to the city council, in that the closure of San Clemente Hospital, of which that's about 7 to 8 patients a day back in 2014 that were being delivered to San Clemente Hospital. Those numbers, I don't have those numbers for you today. If we wanted to reevaluate that, not a problem. But back then, the increased traffic, the increased travel time, the increased wall time, the Public Safety Committee just called me yesterday, and that they're looking at the wall time of Mission Hospital. So when you look at the amount of time that units are committed outside of the city of San Clemente, it causes some concern. Before the closure of the hospital, when the majority of our patients were transported to a hospital within the city, you got to remember that San Clemente, and I would love to drive you around like I was able to do with some of the other council members and show you a little bit as to how we provide service and why. One of the biggest concerns with San Clemente, even as a regional fire protection to the city of San Clemente, is that San Clemente is on a peninsula. There's no help coming from the east. There's no help coming from the west. We have a little bit coming from Camp Pendleton, but it's a different county with different EMS guidelines, although we've worked something out with them, mostly for our wildland response and our truck company response. But we're really at the end of a cul-de-sac. So before the hospital closed, you had 2 paramedic units, and you had what was called a paramedic assessment unit. A paramedic unit by county EMS guidelines, not OCFA, but by county guidelines, is 2 paramedics. When you have 2 paramedics on engine 60, 2 paramedics on truck 59, and engine 50 at the time had 3 personnel with 1 paramedic. So what that means is when we get a medical aid, which you're absolutely right, are the majority of our calls. When we get a medical aid in engine 50's area, we have to send engine 50. And then to get that second, to get the second paramedic, we would also send engine 60. So you have 2 of your fire engines tied up for a simple medical aid. What the addition of that 4th firefighter paramedic on engine 50 did is you now have 3 full paramedic units in the city. The decision to do that was to increase your medical coverage. San Clemente is very well staffed when it comes to that first call. But as an example, a traffic accident on the freeway, we send 1 fire engine from the north and 1 from the south. That's 2 of your paramedic units tied up on 1 call. So your calls can start to reduce our resources in San Clemente very quickly. When I got a phone call this morning talking to City Manager Sund, and that this question might come up, I just randomly looked at my phone that shows all the calls within Orange County. And I saw that there were 3 medical aids at the exact same time in the city of San Clemente. So at 10:42, this shows a little bit as to why we have 3 paramedic units. At 10:40, well, first of all, at 10:41, engine 50, one of their paramedics, was up at the hospital, Mission Hospital, from a previous call at 9:30 in the morning. So the city at the time had 2 paramedic units, and engine 50, because it's 4-person, was able to come back to the station. You have a pump in the station, you have 3 personnel, and you have 1 paramedic. At 10:42, let's see, at 10:42, truck 59 got a chest pain in their first due area. At 10, let's see, let me get my numbers. At 10:46, engine 60 had an infectious disease call in their first due area down in South San Clemente. At 10:53, the 3rd call came in within the city of San Clemente for a dog bite, and that was also in truck 59's area. So what we did was we sent engine 50, but because it was only a 3-person engine at the time, because of the previous call in San Clemente, we ended up sending another paramedic unit from Rancho Mission Viejo. So at that point, you had 4 engines running medical aids in the city of San Clemente. And I assure you that multiple calls in your city are very, very common. It's a busy city. And like I said, that regional response, we're very aggressive with and active on how we move units up. But when it's coming to medical aids, where you have a response time of 7.5 minutes or less, as you move units down from Dana Point and San Juan and Mission Viejo, it takes a while. So as we went through this, as we made the recommendations, the 2 recommendations back in 2016 were, 1, you had 1 ambulance, 1 full-time ambulance, and you had 1 seasonal ambulance. Seasonal ambulance was just during the summer. To deal with the extended response times, the extended drive times, we recommended putting a 2nd ambulance full-time in the city of San Clemente. You now have 2 ambulances with care ambulance in San Clemente. The other recommendation was to add that 4th firefighter with a phased-in cost sharing. That gave you a total of 3 paramedic units in San Clemente. And I assure you that those 3 paramedic units are all busy at times in your city. Part of that is...
Rob, I appreciate that. I guess the question is, how frequently? I know we can point to a day when on this particular day, we had calls within a short time frame, but we have 365 days a year. You said it's frequent. Do you know how frequent that situation is?
I would have to, like I said, I got a phone call this morning that we might be going through this. So if you want to start running some, I can give you some numbers. I have a whole bunch of numbers from the original study that was done prior to hospital closing. We can absolutely go through that again and show you how it works.
Okay, I would just, my concern was that I know that occasionally there's a bottleneck in every service level and people get overcrowded. But again, looking at an example in day 1, we got 365 days a year. And I'm just wondering how big of a problem is this? I know it can be pointed to as an issue, but the cost of addressing that issue, which I don't know, maybe it is significant. When I look at the service levels, what I've observed, the number of people involved, it didn't seem significant, but maybe it is. So anyway, I look forward to maybe looking into that more with you, Rob.
What I'd like to do is offer a ride along anytime. We could go out and look at it. I'll run some numbers and get some updated numbers to compare what it was like back in 2016 with these other numbers and show that we've gotten busier. And I can assure you that in my professional opinion, San Clemente, the last thing that we should do is cut firefighters in San Clemente, cut paramedic units. You need.
Well, I'm not talking about cutting them. What we're doing now is we've increased it from 3 stations with lots of coverage, an additional person that we're now beginning to pay for. I'm not suggesting cutting the service. I'm just suggesting what I'm asking is the level of the necessity of that over a long period of time. To me, we're very well staffed. I could be wrong on that, but maybe I just need to look into it a little more. But the ride along I appreciate, but that won't demonstrate what I'm talking about unless you happen to have 4 or 5 calls all simultaneously that cause a log jam in your service level. But what I'm talking about is over a long period of time the need. So again, I just want to raise the issue because it's a concern to me, only from my personal experience of seeing when I see firemen arrive on a scene, when someone's got a pain in the chest, you know, we've got 6, 7, 8 guys standing around, 1 or 2 are actually working. I'm thinking, gosh, how many times per year does this really happen? I know we're a busy city, but anyway, I'd like to look into it more with you. So thank you for that offer. I'll take you up on it. And I would like to hear more on that issue.
The one correction I would like to share with you, we don't send 8 people to medical aids. So as we start commenting about the number of people, we don't send 8. So
well, I'm just in my mind, I'm recalling a scene when a number of people arrive. But
and then the ambulance does show up with their too.
I'm just saying it looks like we're very well staffed.
And I'll just close it out by saying it happened during my 3-hour ride along just the other day. Yeah. All 3 units were out on emergency calls just during the 3 hours that I happened to be on the ride along.
So I think it's good, you know, Councilmember Block is new, and I think he needs an update of what our service levels are and for each station, you know, in our city. And Mayor Pro Tem, do you have a question?
I do. Rob, I have a question. You said something that was interesting that I want to follow up on. You said that this is an Orange County requirement, not an OCFA requirement. So can you explain exactly the genesis of what the Orange County requirement is?
So there's a county agency that licenses and monitors paramedic as well as EMT level pre-hospital care in Orange County. So it's a county agency. Orange County EMS is the ones that we all answer to, and they're the ones that set the policies, procedures of how paramedics and EMTs operate, both on the private side as well as the public sector, and how they operate within Orange County. So we follow their guidelines that they set forth both for ALS and BLS, which is paramedic and EMT.
And so even if CAL FIRE was operating within Orange County, they would have to comply with the Orange County EMS.
As an example, La Habra, the city of La Habra is covered by LA County Fire. They operate under our treatment guidelines and they follow Orange County EMS policies and procedures. And then when they run a call on the other side of the county line, they follow LA County's guidelines. Same with San Diego. When Pendleton comes up here in an emergent situation, San Diego County paramedics can operate under standing orders based on what you do in your county. But as far as, so if we had a mass casualty incident in San Clemente, we could bring San Diego resources up. But to operate on a daily basis, you follow that local government's, local county's EMS guidelines.
And the genesis of my question is often I hear this, well, I don't understand why we just don't have 3-member crews. LA County does it, so-and-so does it. And this, the information you just gave me really gave me some ammunition to go back to those, I won't say critics, but those observers and say, well, this is what the Orange County guidelines are. That would be a correct statement.
And just to clarify, I like what you're saying, but to clarify, Orange County EMS does not tell you how many firefighters you need on fire engine. What they do tell you is how many paramedics you need to send to a medical aid.
Got it.
So each has 3-person fire engines, but they send 2 of their 4 fire engines to every medical aid, which ties up half of their city for additional calls. So there are drawbacks to doing that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I asked that question not based on immediate observations, but I served for 3 years on the city council, worked with the fire authority, and served on the fire authority board of directors for 3 years. So I know a little bit about the subject, but I'll look forward to chatting with you more on that, Rob. Thank you.
I look forward to spending time with you.
Okay, so city manager and council, I'd like to go to the decision packages if there's no more.
Oh, excuse me, Mayor Ward. I just didn't want to finish today without talking about asking some questions of staff on the pension, because we know that's one of our largest costs or debts we have. So I just have a question of why we combined the JPA for the animal shelter with the city in terms of showing our payment for this past year, $1.3 million. But when I did the math and looked closely, 550,000 of that, I don't know if this is for Eric or Jake, is actually for the animal shelter, the JPA between Dana Point and San Clemente. Could you explain that?
This Jake, the 550 again, that came from CASA. We do contribute to CASA for a substantial part of its contribution, rather than offsetting. I'll call it the city's contribution. They utilize fund balance, and then we're maintaining the same level of contribution that was needed for ongoing operations.
Okay, but let me just be simple here. 550 came from CASA or the city? That 550 for the animal shelter, was that general fund money or JPA money? CASA.
It was 550 that built up over time from
where though?
In CASA.
Okay, so it is CASA. Okay, so those aren't both general fund money. I'm just saying that's commingled. So it's really 750,000 general fund money. And then 550 CASA. So thank you. I bring that up because, you know, as Mayor Pro Tem James has made it an initiative, right, to have us address this this mammoth, nearly $50 million in unfunded pension liability. And we're only at 68% funded. That's not very high. And I just was hoping, and one of my goals for having the city manager provide, as requested at that April 22nd long-term financial plan workshop, to provide that list that his staff provided to us last night, is so that we could have staff take a look at that and bring back to council where we might be able to cut and come up with about 2 million to 2.5 million, along with other places in the city, to be able to pay that off. Because if we don't do that, it's going to grow, right? And we won't keep up with the growth if we keep just doing this small amount every year. It'll take us at that rate, what I write down, 66 years to pay off. And that doesn't even keep up with the growth. So we certainly want to address that and have a plan so that we don't kick this down the road to future taxpayers. And the LTFP plan itself on page 113 that we addressed said staff would seek future actions to improve the pension funding levels. So I just like to make a motion, if I can get support, to do that and bring that back at a future meeting so that we can have staff take a look at this long list. But we do need descriptions added to that contractor consultant list, all those line items. It has the name of the company, the cost, but not what they do. So that would be great to finish that out. So anyway, that's my suggestion, because then we could pay this out off in 20 years and not 66. Thanks.
Can you restate your motion? Yeah. I'm inclined to second it, but if you could restate it for me, please.
Sure, I will. So have council direct staff or have staff come back to council with 2 million to 2.5 million in cuts, starting with the consultant and contractors report that was provided by the city manager's office. That alone totaled over 5 million, 5.9 million, I think. Let me double check. So that's the essence of my motion. So we can get started on coming up with a target for ourselves.
Mayor, before you second that motion, I have that list. A lot of these consultants are service type consultants that fill in and do things for us because we don't have the employees. You know, we save money that way by using them. I'm not against looking at that, but bringing that motion now while we're trying to adopt a budget, I think is poor timing. And we actually have a plan for our pension pay down.
Well, let's
and $2 million, if you take that out of the budget now, it is going to affect services.
I get it, but my point, and I think this is what Councilmember Ferguson is saying as well. How long do we kick this can down the road? And if not us, who? If not now, when?
Well, I think there is a plan. We're looking at selling a property, and one of the things that we were looking at is pension pay down.
So that's one-time cost. That's hard assets, and that's not long-term, Mayor Ward. It's not long-term at all. But I'm not just talking about this consultants list. That was just, like I said, a start. But just thinking of outside the box, just looking at our legal costs every year at $2 million, bringing our legal services in-house, we save $1 million a year. Just an idea.
Our legal services are going to be about $1.1 million this year.
And that's
I'm glad
on June 15th. So I think this is premature to talk about. That is coming back.
Well, and I think, if I may, just a couple of things I want to point out.
Excuse me, Mr. Sun, before you go on, I'm allowed at any time during any meeting to make a motion, and I can have a second to have it on the next agenda. I know if not the next one, it can be the following one. I know the next one will be very busy. Thank you.
And I would just like to comment that I don't think it's ever an improper time to address important budget issues like this.
It's not actually a budget issue. It's an extra ask.
And so a couple of things, and Councilmember Ferguson is completely right. In 2019, we started to deal with, well, and I make it sound like we're being reactive. In 2019, as our LTFP, we brought forward some pension recommendations to start addressing the unfunded liability. But it's important to note, we are on an amortization schedule with Cal that projects paying it down over a 20-year period. So, to say it's going to extend 66 years, it wouldn't be accurate because it's all modeled after a 20-year period. With that said, if there are bad years, what that means is our annual payment goes up to make up for those bad years. When there are good years, our payment reflects that. And I know we've talked a little bit about CalPERS reporting in the rears 2 years back before we see some changes. And as we've talked about, some of our payments that we made last fiscal year of $400,000 in addition to our annual payment still don't reflect in our CalPERS rates. They will true up in 2022. Now, with that said, one of the key things that the council approved was giving staff the flexibility when there is savings in the budget to take that savings and pay down additional unfunded liabilities. And so to the previous slide's point, there was about 1.3 in addition to excess payments, albeit, yes, some of it is cost as pay, but that's within our retirement plan as well as the other plans. And yes, one times would also help pay down that unfunded liability. But if the council, and you're absolutely right, 2 votes would agendize something, but I will say, if you're going to give me direction to look at $2 million in cuts, I'm going to ask the council, where would you like to cut? Because I've presented a balanced budget to you with the recommended services to fulfill the needs over the next fiscal year. $2 million would, for lack of a better word, create a significant amount of service level issues across the board. And I know that in many cases, and I'll go back to the example of when we funded 2 deputies in a couple of budget cycles ago, when we basically came up with the cost savings to fund those 2 deputies, that included changes to our operating hours at the pools, both Vista Hermosa and Ole Hansen. And the community was extremely upset that we reduced pool hours to offset the cost to fund those additional deputies. And I will tell you, it was a very trying experiment for staff because we were following council's direction. And in that particular example, we did not get direction as to where you wanted to see those cuts. And so we did what we felt was best to minimize those costs. Now, again, if you want to, and you're completely at your right to do so, but I would ask, tell me where you would like to see those reductions, because staff are already operating with vacancies, and we're coming out of a pandemic where we had even more vacancies and it tried on the staff. And so to do an exercise of $2 million in cuts would have a negative impact for the staff morale, because everyone would wonder who's on that list or how does it affect me. if you have specific examples of contractual services that you want to revisit, I'm completely open to revisiting those to see if we can do it better or cheaper.
I think some of the contractual services that doesn't even begin to address the issue. I guess I'm going to turn this around on the city manager and on Councilmember Ferguson just a little bit. How about if you come back to us and show us what the impact of a $2 million cut in this budget would be? How that would impact city services, how that would impact City Hall, how that would impact planning, how that would recreation, all these things. So I think it's and I do it all the time. Yeah, I'm going to say I would like to cut $2-3 million out of this budget, but I don't know what the impact would be to the city. So what would be wrong with just the exercise of looking at a $2 million cut, bringing it back, and showing us the stark reality of what we actually are voting for?
I don't believe anything would be wrong with that, with making that request. And when an organization has a budget cut and they need to figure out where that budget's going to come from, the management, Eric, the management of that city needs to make those decisions. Then you say, well, we look to policymakers because they decide, how much money to spend. The policymakers are the ones asking you that question. So I think staff needs to perhaps roll up their sleeves and say, this is a tough call, but if the policymakers in this city decide to make that kind of a cut, the management of the city needs to be prepared to say, I can do that. And this is how I'm going to do it. And we can decide, the policymakers then can say yes or no. But to punt the ball, Eric, and say, well, if you ask me to do this, I'm just going to ask you. I reject that concept. You're the manager of the city. We're looking to you to make the tough decisions, managing the city, managing the resources of the city based on the policy that the council gives you. You may not like it, and it may be tough, but working together to say this is an important priority right now, and I just think we need to move forward the best way possible.
And your point is well taken, Councilmember Knobloch. I just have to give the disclaimer that $2 million will present stark cuts to
clearly.
Also say that this is an exercise that won't happen overnight. We're still dealing with the budget and we need to obviously focus on the adoption. If that was the direction of the staff or the council, I would say that we could definitely do that, but I would probably look to bring that back to council within 3 months for council to review so that we have time. Staff's doing a lot of stuff with not a lot of staff. And so if we had some time, we could definitely come back, and I would say that we would do some precursory reviews of what $2 million in cuts look like citywide.
So let me just try to take some control of this meeting. We are here tonight to go over our budget. It has been presented to us. We know every department has gone through this and made cuts, and we are working with less staff. We have 17 open positions, and we don't have pork to cut. It's just not there. This is what it takes to run the city. So we have a few packages, but frankly, Councilmember Ferguson has brought up almost every budget we've had cut 5%, knowing that even in COVID, we were bottom line barely operating with staff, and cutting 5% is cutting staff and cutting services. So now this third budget, it's interesting. It's now $2 million. So
it's of our unfunded pension liability. It's huge.
We don't have to entertain it and take it up. It's something that I believe Councilmember Ferguson should be working with staff on.
Well, we don't have to if they're point of order. No. We don't have to take it up if the council doesn't want to. There's a motion on the floor.
That's what I'm asking for, right?
I think it was seconded. I think it's totally appropriate. It's not out of order. And if there's a second on the motion, I'd call for the question.
Well, we need to have discussion first. So Councilmember Duncan, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't get a chance to comment. Thanks. No, we should not cut staff. We're at the bare bones. It's so easy to say, let's just lop off a bunch of money. there's something more important than pension liability. It's called service to the city. And these are the folks who are out there working with less to make sure that the city's beautiful, all services are attended to, they're responsive to the citizens. That's way more important. And I'm right there with you on pensions than any kind of pension impact. So I think this is not the right place to go down. Maybe we can have a discussion later, but during the course of the budget that all this time was put in, Jake put in all this time to get sidetracked on this is not, I don't think it's productive on this. I tell you what, there's another avenue we can go down to. How about more revenue, right? We have other potential revenue sources. Maybe that's where we should be looking to get the pensions down instead of trying to take a pound of flesh out of people who are working their butts off, make sure that the city runs well. So I'm offended at going down this road. And I wouldn't support any kind of motion to make staff who's already running lean try to figure out where they're going to cut themselves when they're already barely able to get things done with what they have.
So there's a motion and a second.
No, I don't think there was I did not.
Okay, so I thought maybe Councilmember Knobloch was seconding Councilmember Ferguson's motion. Is that true?
I asked the question. I heard that it was seconded. I thought the Mayor Pro Tem seconded it. Maybe I'm mistaken.
I thought it was too. Am I wrong?
No, I asked for the motion to be restated.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was my motion to start with this contractors and consultant list, because there's, again, that's not staff. Those are outsourced items, consultants, lobbyists, etc. That's why I had this list made, so we can look at that. It includes legal. Glad to hear legal is going to be down $1 million. That's good. That's already half of it. But with all due respect, Councilmember Duncan, you know, my goal wasn't to go cut all the staff in the city. I had this list prepared as requested, the long-term financial plan workshop, so that we can see all of the possibly unnecessary expenditures we're making. And those that were necessary, I wanted someone to be able to identify that and bring it back to us, just so we can start addressing the nearly 50 million unfunded pension liability debt. Thank you.
These type of requests to bring them at this time is just a way of stopping the city from going through our budget.
Kathy, you're accusing me of something I'm not doing. I'm just asked for a second. If I don't have it, then it fails. I mean,
you know, every year you ask for 5% and we know that that's going to cut our services, and now it's 2 million. So I think it's really interesting that now you came up with a dollar figure, but it's the same thing every year.
It's for the unfunded pension liability. You know what? We don't agree hardly ever. So we're allowed to disagree. All right. That's a democracy. Thank you.
There's no second on the floor for your motion.
So can we continue, you know, can we have a situation in which first or second meeting in September, staff comes, because we are going to have to address this $50 million sooner or later. And I totally get it's going to be painful. It doesn't, we don't have to inflict the pain tonight, but we do have to start looking at that pain. And
but that's that's for another time, not tonight, or not to set up, you know, I think we have a plan.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
Could staff bring this back in September or October? And let's really look at a long-term solution to our unfunded liability. I'm guessing our unfunded liability over the next couple of years may shrink a bit, because with the stock market riding as high as it is, but we can't rely on that. We do need to look at whether, you know, I'm reluctant to say this, but I don't know whether it has to be additional revenues somewhere. I don't know where those additional revenues would come from. I'm certainly not going to vote for new taxes, any kind of new tax, or we're going to have to cut spending. But we don't have to cut spending tonight. We don't have to cut spending going into the new fiscal year. But I think in the new fiscal year, we need to have a plan to start paying down this $50 million.
And that is something that's totally agreeable to. And when you say September, it makes me think of our first quarterly report to the council as it relates to our financial status. And I think what I'm hearing, and I appreciate Councilmember Knobloch and Councilmember Ferguson's points, because I'm hearing them loud and clear. As the city manager, allow me now to go back, and as you indicated, we want to pay down more of the pension unfunded liability beyond annual payments. And whether that's me finding savings within the budget or me and staff recommending other revenue enhancements to bring in more money to offset pension liability, I think that's a fair ask. And I think giving us time as it relates to putting our first quarter report together as part of that presentation, we can bring back some ideas and some plans. And then most importantly, and before you know it, I'm gonna have to bring out my Christmas decorations. We're gonna be jumping right back into the LTFP seat late fall. And I will 100% commit that that LTFP will be heavily emphasized on pension. It already is a standard placeholder within our LTFP, but I think if I can get some flavor and some direction from the council in September at the first quarterly report, that can then be built into the 2021 LTFP as part of the pension reform. And we can go further with that as it relates to that. So that's something that would be something very easy for staff to do with those timeframes.
Okay. So I would like to get to the decision packages. That's okay. Sorry. All right. The only one that I want to bring up, I've thoroughly reviewed them all, is the second one. It's a pink page. It doesn't have a page number. That's why I tell you that's the second one. And it's the Mariposa Bridge, the trail handrail. And Laura, I met with the resident who brought this up. And, you know, I agree with adding a rail, but what I want to talk to council about is adding only one rail, not one on each side, just one. Mm-hmm. That leaves it still somewhat open if people are carrying surfboards and things like that, because they're used to that wide area. But if somebody, I totally understand why somebody might want a rail for, you know, peace of mind, feel better about going down that steep part. But what I wanted to bring up to the council is that I have a concern where on that trail, when it comes up to the top of the street, it's a busy corner and that rail is flat. You know, the handrail is pretty flat, and I'm concerned about skateboarders would want to ride that. I don't know what that's called, shredding it. I have no idea. But I think we need to direct staff. I have any idea what it's called. What is it called?
I like shredding it.
Shredding? Okay.
Like shredding it.
I have no idea. I couldn't talk to someone ahead of time to ask them what it's called. But we need to put something on that handrail. So it's going to cost a little more money. But if we only put in one, we've got some savings there. Something that stops them from being able to be on top of that rail, because I could see them doing that and jumping into the street. And it's a corner. So I would like to see that added to it. I don't think it has to go all the way down, but I'll leave that up to staff. You know what we need to cover on that. I just was thinking it was the flat part. I don't think anyone in their right mind would go down that. But I don't know if you know, you find out that you need to do that. If we had a handrail, we might have to do it all the way.
I don't think that's a difficult ask in terms of just preventing further wear and tear on the infrastructure. So that would be something that staff could definitely accommodate. Okay,
so can we modify that to just, it's one side? And I was looking at maybe the left side, the more inland.
The one against the left when you go down towards the beach and access the trail. And actually, that's all I was really looking for when I brought it forward, was that left side against the brush, because then it's very stealth looking. And I think it'd be great. So I'm glad you went there and take a look at it.
It's a good choice to only have it on the left, because they would have to cross over if they were on the right to try to go to onto the bridge. So
exactly, good. Yeah.
Left side going down, it meets with the trail and the tunnel. You know, it kind of there. So I think the left side is a good. I think both sides is overkill.
Yeah, that's a $17,500 savings right there.
Hopefully, but adding, and then something, I don't know what you put on top of it. It probably has to, it's gonna have to be metal.
Yeah,
like,
you know, typically
Aluminum or metal, yeah.
Is that a motion?
little metal shells, so there's an ocean theme to it.
It's nice.
Something though that people can still grab onto it and it's not, you know, hard on their hands or something. Okay, but it stops the skateboarders because I don't think anybody wants them doing that. So do we need to make a motion or do we just can make one motion on all of
You can
these?
make, well, you've already clarified on that number 2 decision package as it relates to the handrail. If you want to then incorporate the other 2 decision packages with a motion and a second, that'll be fine. And we can adopt a budget.
Does anyone else have any modifications to any of the decision packages? I'm not seeing any. So, Mr. Sund, some of the decision packages are in purple and some are in pink. Can you just clarify what they are? Because you say both the decision packages.
So yes, so the ones in purple are already included in the budget.
Oh,
so for instance, the OCSD Citizens Academy, Steed Park, the ones in pink are the ones that the city council needs to deliberate on and provide direction.
Thank you. So we could make a motion to approve the packages that are within the budget. So we're ratifying those choices, right? And then a motion, same motion to approve the decision packages with the modification that for Mariposa Bridge handrail, it is just the left side with the addition of skateboard prevention. I don't know what it's called.
We completely understand what you're looking for.
Okay.
That won't be a problem.
All right, so
Second.
that could be a motion. Okay. Second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Duncan,
Aye.
Councilmember Ferguson,
Aye.
Member Noblock,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem James,
Aye.
and Mayor Ward.
Aye.
Carries 5-0.
Great.
Thank you, City Council.
So are we gonna have to lose you?
Well, what else do we have?
I think that's our only decision. We have or communications and then adjournment. So we might be losing Councilmember Duncan. Okay,
Do we have any public comments?
so go ahead. Do we have any cards? No? Okay, so thank you very much. We're going to adjourn to the June 15th meeting, closed session at 5 o'clock and regular business meeting at 6 o'clock, held in this auditorium on Calle Seville.
Is this closed session in person?
Yes. Yes.
In person only?
I didn't think I had to say that, but yeah.
I just
Do you want it?
know for the agenda that goes out tomorrow.
Right.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, seconded by Councilmember Ferguson.
Councilmember Duncan,
Councilmember Duncan.
Aye.
Councilmember Ferguson,
Aye.
Councilmember Noblock,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem James,
Aye.
and Mayor Ward.
Aye.
Carries 5-0.
Thank you for Jake and the finance team, and thank you for all of the executive leadership that was on this workshop. I appreciate it. And also thank you, Capobianco and Manhart, for attending as well.
Yes, I really appreciate everyone's participation.